Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
Hello, we are recording this episode at noon on Tuesday, November 5th, which in the US is Election Day. Ooh, what do you think, Rachel?
Very exciting. I mean, I'm going to say from a selfish perspective, I'm so excited today is here because I'd like less ads and text messages.
Yes, whoever is able to come up with the startup that stops all political ads once you've early voted, you are going to be my best friend in the whole world. But what we wanted to do today is a little bit different. So welcome to Managed Chaos. But today we're going to talk a little bit about how you as a leader can really help your team get through the chaos of major events like today, the election in the US.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of major events in the last, I'm going to say 5-6 years, from the COVID pandemic to so many civil rights moments in our country to even here in North Carolina, where I live, a couple months ago, maybe just a month ago, I'm losing track of time already. There's a giant hurricane that came through and we are still cleaning up from that. And so really, what does it look like as a leader to be present in that moment? And what do you do in the face of that uncertainty?
Yeah, and even global, right? And so, I remember when the conflict in Ukraine started and we had engineers that were based there. And so I think there's just been a lot going on. And I think our people who are having to still work, right? And come into work every day. And, I remember during the pandemic, it was always, oh, this is so unprecedented. And it's like, okay, great. Well, it's also unprecedented for us as people. What are we supposed to do?
Right.
And you look to those leaders for guidance and they're like, well, we don't know what to do.
Right. Because at the end of the day, a leader is also just a human. And so it's really important for us to think about this, not from a purely business perspective where we give you the data and the software and the tips and tricks of like how to run the organization. But really we look at this from the social one where we are all humans first. And we really need to make sure that we think about our actions as they relate to people truly just being people. So the first question we really had for us today is, a big event happens, and we can say that's global or local or national, but as a leader, what do you do?
Yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before we hopped online, and I think part of it is understanding that not everybody's approaching it from the same lens you are. And sometimes people just want to know that you understand that maybe they're not going to be able to work that day, or maybe that their level of anxiety is high and they don't want to have meetings, or they might not want to be camera on, or that, different things that are said in political arenas affect them differently. And they want to know that it affects you too. And I think pretending that it doesn't affect you because you want to make it seem like it's business as usual, or maybe what's said doesn't directly affect your business, it does affect your team and it affects your people. And I think being someone who can have a meeting with folks and say, I would love to hear your perspective, or talk to me about how this made you feel. And I understand that's a bit touchy-feely maybe for some leaders. And maybe you have someone on your C-suite team who's just better at doing that. But I do think that we need to continue to look at our people as people, not just as, cogs and wheels that are getting things done for our organization, because your team is really just living, breathing people, and they have feelings.
Yeah, that's completely correct. So that I have a leadership coaching business on the side, and we really focus on human-centric leadership. What does it mean to lead really with the person as the central driving force? And something I say there a lot is that we are humans who go to work. We are not workers who go home. And so you can't divorce what happens in the world around you, whether that's a collective experience, like some sort of event or tragedy or whatever that you're facing as a collective unit, or an individual. If that person has someone at home who is sick and they need to be attentive to that, or whatever their personal kind of places. And so, to throw in a few numbers just to get this in front of people who maybe aren't as touchy-feely about this topic, it's a known entity that highly engaged employees have 21% higher productivity than disengaged employees. And that is a 1-to-1 correlation for profitability. So let's talk just for a second, as a leader, changing your mindset into what does it mean to be productive? And I would argue that in these kind of moments, productivity doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter, because you're going to have such an incredible decrease of productivity if you don't allow them to attend to that emotional, mental, social need that they have, that your revenue will be affected. It is much better for you to allow them to take care of that thing, whether that is, taking a full break, let them have time off, or just let them decrease the ways that they have to show up in a way where their cognition is at full force engagement, right? So that's the difference of just go work from home or do tasks that don't require you to be on camera or talk to other people. And then that way they can engage in those moments where they're best suited to engage. And really, the statistics are now that there's only 3 to 4 hours of productive, quote unquote, productive work anyway. And so what does it matter if they're doing, 100% productive work in 3 to 4 hours or 80% productive work over 5 to 6 hours? You're going to get the same kind of productivity. So as a leader, I would say refocus on the fact that all the people that make your business successful are people. It's not products and tools and services, and let them be people.
And how, in doing that, how can you also support them, right? So I think one of the things is that your team may not necessarily be looking to you to come out on a political side or say who you're voting for, or it's really more about making them feel heard and allowing them to, express opinions and beliefs. And I think last week, maybe the week before, a comment was made about Puerto Rico being an island of trash, right? And I think there's different perspectives that you can have on that. But I think that when someone is from Puerto Rico, that really innately affected them, right? And so they might be looking to you as a leader to just say, hey, are you doing okay? Did you, I understand that it was said by a comedian and it was said in a joking manner, but are you all right? Is that, did it, is there anything you want to talk about, right? Just opening the door and allowing people, regardless of political belief, right? But just an understanding and showing that you understand their heritage, you understand where they're from or where they come from or what they identify, and allowing them space to, also see you as a person.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the key part of what you're talking about is that you're allowing that individual to have choice. And so as a leader, if you want to support your team, the best way to support them is asking them how they want to be supported. Don't make an assumption that you understand what everybody needs, because everyone's going to be different. Some people are going to be like, oh, I'm going through this really hard thing. All I want to do is work and get my mind off of it.
Yeah.
And other people are going to be like, I can't think about anything but this. I need a break. So I can just go outside and go for a walk or just obsessively watch the news or talk to my loved ones or whatever that looks like. And so I think, we as leaders take on a lot of burden to want to think we know everything. And sometimes we just don't know. And it is a better move for your business and you as a leader to just let them tell you what they need. And then the best way to support them.
I agree. And you don't have to have all the answers, right? The point of having a call where you allow people to express themselves is just to listen. It's not to solve the problem, right? You're not going to solve it.
No.
And I think in some cases we tend to, as leaders, think, okay, I have to solve this so then everyone can move on. And in some cases that's actually it's just not possible, right? There's just not a way. And I do think, we're recording this on election day. I do think this is going to be one of those elections we're not going to know tonight who won, right? And so there's going to be that level of anxiety. I had one client tell me that they're canceling meetings tomorrow because they just felt like people are going to be too, mired in watching what's happening. And so they felt like it just wouldn't necessarily be fair to have people on calls, right? And I think it's something that we have to, as leaders, start to feel the pulse of our team and understand. And also use our mission to guide us, right? If as a company, depending on what our mission is, making sure that we're aligned with that as we start to think about, what does the rest of this week look like?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. What does the rest of this week look like for businesses, for teams, for leaders moving things forward? And I'm going to immediately lean into the things I know about human behavior through marketing. So when you send out a email about a webinar, for example, there's certain statistics that we know to be true about how people engage with information. We know that the first 24 hours, you'll have absolutely the most response. If somebody's going to watch the webinar or read the email, you'll get that activity most likely in the first 24 hours, but we typically wait to measure until the first 48 hours. So in this regard, I would say human behavior is telling us that if there's going to be some sort of really impactful moment for you as a leader or a team or a business, look at the first 48 hours. How can you make things as smooth as possible for the people who need a lot of different types of things in this moment so that business can just continue with or without them, right? How can you just go into neutral for 48 hours? And then after that, that same email, that same kind of universe, we see that in the first week, there's still stragglers and things that happen, but basically after a week, you should shut it down. You should move on, do the next thing, if it's another email, promotion, whatever. And so similarly, looking at it as a business, looking at how much you've been impacted, whether it's by a team or a society or a culture thing, think about it in a week scope. So in the first 48 hours, how can we just go into neutral? For the first week afterwards, what can we do to slowly ramp things back up so that we can get back to business as usual? I would say from a really tactical and practical level, start there, having already, hopefully, cross my fingers, talk to the team about what they need and what your organization is really about. And I do want to put one more caveat in this because it just occurred to me, is that there are some businesses who might thrive under whatever the chaos is, or might be at their most peak moment. And I want to acknowledge that that is going to be a whole different set of empathy and exercises and requests that you're going to have to make from your business, because whether or not it feels good to show up, those are the times that you as a business really have to keep showing up. A great example is in crisis management, the software that is used to help triage, to get aid and help to people, has to still be running. And so those people, whether or not they're personally impacted or how they feel, the business is responsible for moving things forward. So I just do want to acknowledge that as a moving forward. But what do you think, Katrina? What are things that
I agree. After having spent so many years working in media, right? So it has to keep happening, right? People need, they need the news, they need to know what's going on, and you have an obligation, right? And a duty. I think, moving forward can mean different things to different people, right? And I think sometimes it's hard to move forward when you feel like there's maybe an absence of information. And so ensuring that your team has all the information on the business and what the business is planning to do, and ensuring that they can stay focused on that mission and vision can sometimes be helpful. Once you've talked to them and you made sure that you are supporting them and you know what they need, but making sure that you're being very clear about what the business goals are, regardless of, the outcome of the election or regardless of the outcome of a particular event. And then understanding that, as in case of the hurricane, for instance, right? Understanding that maybe you're not going to get the most out of your employees that are directly impacted in that moment, and that other folks are going to have to pick up the slack. But if you have a culture where they know that if something was to happen to them, that they would have a slack picked up for them, it's a lot more likely that you continue to move forward, right? And so ensuring that your culture is kind of applied evenly and equally, and that you do have that culture, and as you grow and as you scale, that you continue to have that culture of sort of the employee comes first, right? And that, the employee is important and everything around the employee is important. I think that you can actually continue to move forward fairly easily as long as your team knows you've got their back. And what I like to say is, if it was happening to you as a leader, what would you expect your team to do? So would you expect the team to cut you slack because you lost your house in a hurricane? I would think so. And so you should really afford them those same, that same level of empathy as they go through those types of scenarios.
I'm so glad you've said this. And I think this is a perfect way to wrap up this episode, is that one, communication is key. Making sure that you are not silent doesn't mean that you're making a stand, but not silent, and that you're able to give expectations. And then also that your leaders are really present with you to move things forward. And the key there, I think, is that you should have already established trust and a strong culture before the moment of tragedy happens, or the moment of uncertainty happens, I should say. And if you haven't, then it's going to be much more difficult than if you've already taken the time to authentically invest in that as an organization.
Yeah, you cannot create culture under duress.
I'm going to quote that, and I'm going to write it on every single leader I find.
All right, this has been another episode of Managed Chaos Podcast, coming to you somewhat live on Election Day. You're going to probably be listening to this episode tomorrow or at any point on any of your streaming choices. And so we will see you again soon.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.